Hey everybody. Today I want to talk about the least fun aspect of keeping pets, and of course this applies to fish as well as any other kind of pet, and that is when that pet is coming to the end of its life. And I've got a purple spotted gudgeon right now who's very clearly coming to the end of its life. It stopped eating, it's not really doing anything except lying on the bottom of the tank. When it does swim around, it can't swim properly, and it's really sort of distressing to watch. And so I've been on the fence over the last week about whether or not to euthanize it. And in this video, that's what I want to discuss. I don't want to discuss various methods of euthanization. I've talked about that in other videos. I will real quickly say that when it comes to small fish, I use the simple blunt force method. I just take the net and give it a quick smack on the concrete floor, and that's that. It's over with, lickety split. And with a small fish like that, it doesn't really make a mess. With the larger fish, I use the clove oil method, which is simply putting the fish in a smaller container like a bucket and then adding a little bit of clove oil. And then once the fish begins to slow down a little bit, you add a little more clove oil, and eventually the fish just passes away. That's not as smooth and gentle and quiet as a lot of people like to portray it. It is kind of unpleasant doing the clove oil method, or at least I found it to be a little unpleasant. And that's all part of my decision-making process of when do I decide to actually finally do that, you know, make that decision to collect that fish out of the tank and kill it, basically. You know, I know we like to use the term euthanize and euthanization and everything, and that puts sort of a antiseptic touch to it, but what we're doing is we're taking one of our pets and we're killing it. And I've had this fish for years, and it's a tough decision to make. It would be a little easier if it was a warm-blooded animal like a cat or a dog. You can kind of tell when they're suffering. But with a fish, where do you make that decision whether or not it's suffering? The idea of like a quality of life doesn't really come into play, because in order for quality of life, you have to sort of have this basic understanding of your own mortality, and you have to understand that I can't do the things I used to be able to do, and there's just a lot more complex thinking involved and a lot more self-awareness involved in that sort of equation than I think fish are capable of. Even when it comes to physical pain, I don't know exactly what fish feel, but it's not pain like you or I associate with pain. They just don't have a complex enough nervous system to feel the things that we feel in a physical sense. So when is the fish suffering? As far as I can tell, as long as I don't bother the fish, it just seems to lay there on the bottom of the tank. It's not in any distress. It's, you know, it's not swimming around in corkscrews constantly and all that stuff. The only time it seems to get distressed is when I go near it or bother it. As long as I leave well enough alone, it just seems to lie there. And so for the most part, I'm content to just let it lie there and do its thing. When I see it swimming around and it's all going in corkscrews and banging into the glass, the real distress is on my part. You know, I feel like I want to euthanize this fish to put me out of my misery. Am I doing it for the fish, or am I doing it for me? Because it distresses me to see the fish swimming around. It's almost like it's having kind of seizures or convulsions or something, which is never a pleasant thing to witness. And so, would I be euthanizing the fish for the fish's sake, or would I be euthanizing the fish for my sake? And at the end of the day, does it really matter? I mean, this fish is not going to live much longer. It stopped eating a while ago, and at the very least, it's just going to slowly starve to death because I'm not feeding it anymore. So, is that wrong? Is that the cruel way to let it go? Is just let it not eat? I mean, I've offered it food, it doesn't want it. So, it's either not capable of eating, or it's lost its appetite because of whatever reason, but this fish is clearly on its way out, one way or another. And it just remains down to when do I make that decision to get in there and actually physically do it myself, rather than just let nature take its course. Now, I'm a big old coward when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm not ashamed to admit that at all. I absolutely hate doing this kind of stuff. You know, when it comes to my cats and my dog, back in the day when I had my dog, you know, I had to take him down because he was suffering. He was whimpering and crying. He was clearly in pain, and I needed to do something to relieve him. But I've had cats that have just you know, as long as they're not in pain, I just let nature take its course, because I just really, really hate making that final trip down to the vet. It is just the worst. And when it comes to fish, it's not that bad. You know, I do keep things in perspective. I don't put fish in the same category emotionally as I do my cats or a dog or something like that. But it's still a tough thing to do, and I don't like doing it. If I can just sit back and not look at the fish until one day I come in and, hey, I've got a dead fish in the tank, it's time to dispose of it, that's okay by me. You know, that's the way I would much prefer to do it, rather than be the one to actually say it's time to go kill my fish now. So if the fish does get to the point where it is swimming around in circles and it seems like it's agitated or distressed or something like that, I will go ahead and do the deed at that point. But as long as that fish is content to simply lie there, I'm going to let it lie there, and sooner or later it'll just pass away, and I'll just go ahead and dispose of it, and that'll be the easy way. But it's the easy way for me, and I recognize that, and that's really kind of the main point of where my thoughts have been circling around with this whole idea of, like, when do you euthanize the fish or not. It's not a matter so much as when it's good for the fish to do it, but it really kind of boils down for me is, when am I ready to do it? When do I think it's, you know, easier to do that than it is to not do it? And so that's what we're going to have to wait and find out. But as of now, I'm going to let it ride, because, as I said, as long as I don't go over there messing around with the tank, it just seems content to lie there, and we're just going to let it lie there. So we'll see how it goes. So I'd be interested to hear your point of view, your opinions, you know, your thoughts on that. This is definitely something that's going to be personal for every individual, and it's probably even going to be personal for every specific fish you look at. It's a lot, you know, easier to do that to some fish you just bought and it's a sick fish in quarantine, versus some fish you've had for 6 or 8 years and you've watched it grow old, and so on and so forth. You know, there's an emotional component to it, and as long as we're human, that's going to play an impact, or, you know, at least for me, the emotional factor is always going to play a role there. And so I think for not only for every individual is it going to be a personal thing, I think for every individual fish that we look at, it's probably still going to be a unique situation each and every time. So that's just my 2 cents. You know, I'd like to hear yours. As I said, you know, put your comments down below. I'll get back to you and I'll respond to anyone that I can. In the meantime, I'm just going to let things ride, and we'll see where it goes. So make sure you're subscribed, and that way you won't miss anything I got coming up, whether it's about that fish or anything else. You never know what it's going to be with me. So thanks again for watching this one. I'll see you real soon in the next one.